Hello, this is the Veterans History Project. My name is Walter Little. Today is April 14th, 2016, and we're at Metro East in Gresham, Oregon. Today we have with us retired Staff Sergeant Kenneth Gerald Prichett. Mr. Prichett, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Good to see you.
Yes.
So, where were you born?
In Portland, Oregon.
Ah, native.
Yes.
And when would this have happened?
February 18, 1924.
1924.
Right.
And do you have brothers, sisters?
I had a brother, and he passed away in 1946.
Older, younger?
Younger, 7 years younger, yeah.
And was any of your family besides you in the military?
No.
It
No.
was you.
My father would have been, but he was a pressman and got his hand caught in the press in 1916 or something, and he didn't get into World War I, but he would have otherwise.
So, did you go to high school then in Portland?
I went to high school in Gresham.
In Gresham?
Gresham High. I went to the old school for 2 years and 2 years to the new school, the one that's there now.
Right, yeah.
My name is in that cornerstone.
Oh, that is nice.
Yeah.
So, when you were in high school, what did you want to be or do when you grew up?
I don't know. I raised on a farm, and I don't think I had much deal. In those days, it wasn't always an opportunity for the people, because of the Depression, to go to college. Mm-hmm. So, but I did know that I was going to eventually be drafted.
And you were drafted?
I was drafted.
And how old were you when you were drafted?
I was 18.
18? So pretty much right out of high school?
Take it back. I was 19. I was drafted in 43. I was 18 in 42.
And where'd you go to basic at?
I went to Camp Abbott, Oregon, which is now Sun River, just out of Bend. It was a combat engineer camp. I took my training there. And
what was your MOS then, back then, going to be?
I was just a Bucks private.
Just a private?
Yeah, a recruit, trainee. And I took my basic training there. And then at the end of that, I was called into the captain's office and told that I was going to become an officer, that he would give me 15-day furlough, and I was going to go home. There was a group of us, about 10. And we were going to go home and then come back, and we were going back to East and become an officer. And when we got back, I said, oops, we can't make the schedule, but 90 days from now we will get you there, but would you help us train the next increment? So as you see in the photo there, I got my corporal stripes and became a drill instructor. And I was there.
What was your rank at this time? It wouldn't have been a buck private.
I was a corporal at that time.
Corporal.
Yep. And then I helped train a whole increment. By that time, I was getting pretty tired. I was saying hup, hup, hip four. And because we had to be pretty tough with the new recruits. There was 6 weeks of drilling on the range and marching and everything, and 12 weeks of engineer training, where you had to build bridges at night, and then they ended up with a 20-mile hike, and you had to pass it or you were out of the Corps. 20-mile hike, and the last 2 miles you had to double time, and the last mile you had to wear a gas mask. And a lot of them failed it. Mm-hmm. And if you passed it, why? And time I went through that the second time, I was getting tired of it. So I went into the first sergeant and said, sign me up for overseas duty. So within a couple of weeks, I was heading east.
So how long were you a drill sergeant then?
I was there. I was at Camp Abbott, Oregon for a whole year. Mm-hmm. And you take 18 weeks off on that, and I was a corporal at that time, a drill instructor at that time.
So, who was harder? The drill sergeants that you had to go through, or you?
Well, that was a tough job, because even though we had permit passes, could get off anytime we were off duty, and had our weekends, and we had our own private quarters, mm-hmm. we still were quarantined when the new recruits came in, just like they were. And it was, we had to get the men up at midnight sometimes to pick up cigarette butts and all kinds of things like that, just to drill discipline into them. So it wasn't always easy.
No, but did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah.
So You signed up for overseas, then what happened?
Well, then I ended up at Camp Shenango in Pennsylvania. It's still there, not as a camp, but they turned all the barracks into low-cost housing. The reason I know that, I visited a while back. But anyway, there, and here's where the strange part happens. I was put into a company called X-43. We were told that we would be a replacement soldier 43 days after D-Day. And I was made a sergeant. And I was a full platoon sergeant. And I had 3 chevrons then. And so then we were sent to New York, and we got on a ship called the George Washington. It had 7,000 troops on that ship. It was a huge luxury liner, 7th in the world, they said. And the second day out, we were attacked by a submarine, and we got the submarine, the Navy did, so we were safe. But we were the head of the convoy, and we ended up in Liverpool, England. And one of the lords had given one of his estates over, and we were bivouacked there. And then we went into training, completely. Training, getting ready for this 43 days after D-Day. This is in about June or July that we were there. And but the war went so well that it was September, October before we ever left England. And all this time we're in training. And because of my experience as a drill instructor, one time we were out training for hand grenades, and I was one in charge, and I was supposed to train each recruit how to throw a hand grenade. You don't throw it like I do a baseball, you lob it. And of course we had 7-second hand grenades, not the 3 seconds that we used in, And I was going through this, and we'd yell, fire in a hole, and the officers that were in charge would drive behind these 2 logs there. And one of the fellows came up. I showed him how to hold a hand grenade, showed him how to pull the pin. He pulled the pin, passed out, and dropped the hand grenade at my feet. And I pushed him down and grabbed it and yelled at the officers, and they drove behind the deal, and I threw it. And I was praying all the time that hand grenade would hit the ground before it went off, because if it went off in the air, it would have hurt a lot of people. But the captain says, because it was not in combat, I was not entitled to any medals or anything. But anyway, then we built Bailey bridges there, and we did all kinds of training. And finally, we ended up at the Queen's Barracks, just out of London, and we went on a troop ship.
Well, before we do that, could you explain to me what a Bailey bridge is?
Yes, a Bailey bridge is like a rector set almost. It has units that you just hook on, and you must always maintain the superior part of the bridge back to keep the weight, and you can actually cantilever it out over the water. And you keep, and whatever you have in excess, and you have to take off. But it's just like a rector set, so put together with pins.
This is to allow transport to cross a river.
Oh yeah, the main bridge it's a heavy-duty bridge. Tanks and everything can cross it. It's a real heavy-duty bridge.
So it's an emergency bridge for when the actual bridge has been blown up, or you want to egress someplace the enemy doesn't expect.
Yes, we, although I didn't build any of those in combat, because we had in the 5th Army, we had all floating pontoon bridges.
Well, I know it depends on the width of the river, but say an average river, how long would it take to establish one of these bridges?
Quite a while. Because
a couple days?
Yeah, well, maybe a day and a half. It depends. And it was possible to build it all on the land and swivel it too.
Oh.
But anyway.
Then after the Bailey bridges? Yeah,
then we went and landed in France. And the captain of the boat had guaranteed us all would have an easy landing, because we were going to be put into ducks, which can go right onto the ground. And I took one look over the side. I was a platoon sergeant. They lied to us again. I said, that's a landing craft. And sure enough, we got in there and got within 200 feet of the shore, and he grounded. He just dropped the front end and says, "You guys are on your own."
So what are you, about waist deep?
Water came up to here. We had our duffel bags and rifles over our head, walked out. And that night I found a barn with hay in it, and I put my men in there. And then the next day we got on what they call a 40 and 8, and it's nothing but a box car, no facilities, no heat, no lavatory, nothing, no water, and we traveled across France that way.
So how long would you have been on there?
Quite a while. Then we would have staging places where we would stop and take showers and rest. But finally we got into Belgium, and that's where the Battle of Bulge came. We had just gotten into this last staging outfit where we would be sent to our regular outfit. And it was a schoolhouse that they had confiscated, and I had just moved my platoon into the schoolhouse. And some of the fellows says, that had been there before, said, there's a great restaurant downtown. Just go downtown and get a good steak. So several of us went down there. We just ordered the steak when a runner came from headquarters and said, "You got to come back to headquarters right away. The Germans have broke through." And we could hear all this machine guns going and stuff when we went back. And he told us, the major says, "I have no transportation for anybody, but I have one Jeep. I'm going out, I'll get transportation." He drew a map for everybody and said, "I'll meet you there." And then everybody started leaving. And then he turned to me. He says, "Sergeant, you keep your men here and guard this place." And I said, "Okay," and I saluted. And then my men said, "What are we going to do?" And I said, "Well, we're going to obey orders." And just then a colonel came up in a Jeep. He says, "Sergeant, what are you doing here?" And I said, "I was ordered here to stay here and keep this place." He says, "I gave orders for everybody to leave. You take your men and leave." So we marched out, and that night we came upon the 7th Armored Division supply train. And we're walking along, the drivers were all asleep. And my men must have woke up one of them because he saw this white stripe on my helmet and headed right for me and broke the legs of the 3 men behind me. So I sent a couple of corporals out to find medics, and they had an ambulance there, so I put them in. I never saw those men again. It hit me, but I had started to leap to the ditch, and I was saved. But anyway, then when we got out, the snow was 2 feet deep, and we slept in the snow that night. When we finally got out, the major was there with transportation, took us to Liège, Belgium. And from there, I went into the 5th Armored Division. So by the 9th, this was the 16th when that happened. On the 19th of December, I was with a regular outfit, 5th Armored Division.
Now, if that colonel hadn't come along, would you have been captured then in the position you were at?
Pardon?
You were told to guard.
I was told to guard that schoolhouse.
Right.
When the Germans were coming with all their tanks.
Now, if that colonel hadn't come along, would you have been captured?
If that colonel hadn't come along, I wouldn't be here. I was told afterwards that 1 hour after we left that restaurant, the Germans came in there and killed everybody in that restaurant. So I don't know. I was told that by the chaplain. I don't know whether it's true or not. Anyway, then I went to the 5th Armored Division and the 22nd Armored Engineers, Company B, and it was I was in, here's the strangest thing. I was a sergeant at the time, but when I walked in to talk to the captain, he says, "Why do you have sergeant stripes?" I said, "Well, I've been a sergeant since May." He says here you're a corporal. So cut one off.
Oh, wow.
So then 2 days later, we went out to pick up some minefields, and I was always the last one into the truck, make sure everybody got in, and I was just set it down when I heard a bam. And the truck stopped, and the driver came back and says, "Corporal, the sergeant's been killed." One of the men that's sitting right behind the cab had laid his rifle down across his knee and leaned over to have a cigarette lit, and his rifle went off and killed the sergeant. And so I became the squad leader then. And it's the strangest thing happened all through the combat and everything. I'm as a squad leader. But by the time of sleeping in the snow and everything. By the time Christmas came that year, I was ill, and I went to the infirmary, and the infirmary, the officer there says, "Well, you're okay," and he sent me back to work the next day. By New Year's Day, I was totally out of it. So I ended up 1 month in the hospital, and I was sent to Paris. And then they couldn't do anything for me because I had what they call nasal pharyngitis, and so they sent me to a hospital on the coast. And the doctor says, "I can't do anything for you. We're going to send you to London." The next day, the fever broke, and I was then put back on the service. So I was in the hospital for a month, and then when I came back, well, I was back being the squad leader.
And that was the 5th Armored?
That was with the 5th Armored Division, the 22nd Armored Engineers. We did a lot of bridges, building over little creeks and stuff, anywhere that would stop the supply trains keeping up with the tanks. The tanks could go almost anywhere, but the supply trains, they had to have good streets. And so that's what we did. We built bridges, we fixed roads, we made sure that everything was moving. That was our job. One time we came across a bridge. We had a big tanker truck that looked just like an oil tanker truck. It was a compressor. All our tools were pneumatic. All our hammers, everything was pneumatic. We were really equipped in World War II. Anyway, we came across this one bridge, and we had run out of tactical lumber. That's the beams. And the captain sent 2 men out, or 3 men out to cut down some big trees. And they brought them in there, and he says, "Okay, fellas, make timbers out of them." Nobody knew how. And I said, "I know how." So I laid them out, and with the adze, they actually made timbers, and we finished that bridge. So anyway, then the last day of that war, we were building a pontoon bridge to make the final crossing of the Elbe River. We had the bridge all laid out in the street when a German jet, the first jet we had seen, it was a real jet, it wasn't a propeller airplane, came down and spotted our bridge. And he came right down and looked at it and went up like this and was going to come down and strafe the whole bridge. When one of our Piper Cub spotter planes spotted him and flew right at him. And he veered off. When he veered off, he came down and bombed the cross street and strafed it. Missed our bridge. But it didn't make much difference. Eisenhower stopped the war that day. We would have been in Berlin the next morning.
So when that jet was aiming at that bridge, where were you?
I was right in the, like here. Here's the cross street, and here's where the bridge was. I was right there.
So you were right in his target
ditch, right next to where he bombed and where he did. I did, during the combat time, I did lose 3 other men. We had moved into a deal, and the men found what they thought was a drink in a mortuary. And I kept telling them, "No, it's a bombing fluid." But they drank it anyway. They said, "Oh, no, this is anisette." And most of them got drunk. So 2 of us put them all and helped them all get into their prone shelters. And we were so tired after it was over, we went and found a ditch and a door and slept under it. The next morning, I woke up and I heard this plane come over. And I heard, shh, boom. The bomb landed right on my truck, blew out all the tires, and the assistant squad leader had placed his helmet over his shoes right next to the prone shelter we had helped him dig. The second bomb hit that and buried him, and the 3 men that had gotten up and lit the fire that morning to deal with, which attracted the plane, they were all injured badly. But the mystery of it, there was a sergeant there that had been was ready to be court-martialed. The captain was going to give him a summary court-martial. He had come over and climbed into my truck. He was drunk, and laid on the bench in the truck. The bomb took out the metal under him and all the wood railing above him and never touched him. But anyway, that's where I lost 3 men in combat too. And then when the war ended, we were left to guard a property in what was going to become the communist property where the Russians were going to take over. And I actually was with an outpost where the Russians did take over.
Now, at this time, you would have been what rank?
I was still corporal, according to the captain.
Still a corporal.
Yeah, so, but I was a squad leader, which should have been the buck private. So then I'm transferred to the 3rd Armored Division, and we were told that there we would be trained and go to Japan and fight in that war. And when I walked into the captain, he says, it says here you're a sergeant. How come you're wearing corporal stripes? One thing, it was a mystery to me that I never figured out. My pay never changed, so I don't know. Anyway, I became a squad leader there. In combat, a staff sergeant is a platoon sergeant, but in this company X-43, a buck sergeant was a platoon sergeant. So anyway, we trained, and then that war ended in August.
What was your training?
We were getting ready. We were out with tanks and with half-tracks. By that time, I had a half-track instead of a truck. And we were out just getting ready for the deal. We were told we would go to through the United States, get a 15-day furlough, go to San Francisco, get on a troop ship, and head for South Pacific. But that war ended in August, which we're all thankful for. So then I was sent to a supply depot in Lyon, France. And there, the major sent me out into field operation. And I reported to a lieutenant, and he says, I got a job for you. But I was wearing buck sergeant stripes at that time. And I said, okay, where? And he says, I got a real job for you. He says, we've been receiving all this glass from all these huts, Quonset huts, and it's just a mess. He says, all this stuff is broken and all the boxes are broken. So he gave me about 5 prisoners and a couple of corporals. He said, I want you to clean this up. He came by 3 days later, everything was clean. We had all the broken glass and barrels, and we had all of the boxes relabeled and all put back together. He says, come with me. And that's how I got to be in charge of the whole thing and all the field operation. And he put me in for staff sergeant then. So from September through December, I was there at that place. Then I was told, because I had enough combat points, that I would be home by Christmas of 45. And so we got on a train, went down to the coast of France, and there we were told that we would get on this ship the next morning. And several of us were down there just drooling over that ship, a beautiful ship. It was a big one. And we would be back home pretty quick. Along comes a convoy right down there. The general gets out of his Jeep, walked over to the office and argued with the port master, told him to hide out, took his MPs and guarded that ship and took it away. Confiscated it right out from under us. So I went back to Lyon Supply Depot there, and I was there for Christmas, and I was there for New Year's. And then I got my orders to get back on the train and go to Lyon. And I was on the Wheaton Victory. It took us 15 days to cross the Atlantic because we hit a giant storm. We got into New York City, and you've seen these fireboats with all beautiful. We had that reception, and I was fortunate that when they didn't put me on a train, they put me on a plane, and I flew from Newark, New Jersey to Boeing Field. And then I went to Fort Lewis, and then I was, by the 3rd of February, I was out, headed home. And that's my whole Army life.
So when you left the military, then what happened?
Pardon?
When you left the military, what happened?
Well, then I went home and
back to Portland area?
But with Gresham right here. We had a farm just out of Gresham on what's now Callister Road, right on Highway 26 there. The Prichett farm, the Highway 26 takes back 3 acres of the Prichett farm. Anyway, I went there, and a friend of mine had been in the CBs, and when he came out, he was superintendent, one of the builders. He told me if I had a car, I had a job, so I went to work as a carpenter. But I had my mind set to go to college. So in the fall, I went to Oregon State. And I took electrical engineering and industrial engineering in a class in 1950. But because of the war, and because of being in the hospital in the war, my health was not all that great. And so in my junior year, I came down with pneumonia again, which lasted 3 months. So I never finished my college education, but I did go to work for Bonneville Power in the engineering division in their transmission design, worked for Bonneville for a number of years. Then I went back in the carpenter's business because when Eisenhower became president, Nixon convinced the government they shouldn't have workers, and we were all caught in a big RIF, reduction in force. And so I went back into the building business and did that up until 1969, and I went back to work for the government, City of Portland, as a building inspector.
Now, you've been married a long time, so I'm assuming some point in here you got married?
We got married in 1948 on June 24th, and I wrote the Queen of England and told her on June 24th, 1947, just the time we're getting married, is the first time they saw UFOs in modern history. And it happened right over in the Northwest here. I wrote the Queen and told her that was the angels celebrating our wedding. Joyce and I have been married for 68 years. We'll be 78 years in 2017.
That is nice.
We have 5 children, 9 grandchildren, and 12 great-grandchildren.
And what are your children's names?
Pardon?
What are your children's names?
Well, there's Barbara and Terry and Janet and Diane and Ruth. All and Ruth still carries the Prichett name. The others have their married name. And Jan, our daughter Jan, she lives in our house in Troutdale. And so do 5 of our great-grandchildren live there, and our granddaughter. They're all living in our house in Troutdale. But we are living in Courtyard Fountains in the retirement home. It got too much. When I got to be 88 and 87, it got too much to do all the work. I couldn't climb ladders anymore, so I decided we better go where somebody else is taking care of that. But I'm still healthy. I don't take any medication of any kind.
Wow. And you're how old?
92.
That's quite something not to be on. My cabinet's halfway full, and I'm nowhere near 90. So, are any of your children or grandchildren, did they ever go to the military?
Yes, my grandson did, and he took his training and injured his hip, and he had to be mustered out. But he was really, didn't want to go. He tried to stay in and do everything, but he's out. And one of the things we have, our youngest grandson is 1 year older than our oldest great-grandson. There's only 1 year between the 2 generations. I have a great-grandson who's 22 years old.
Congratulations. Yeah, I was fortunate. I knew my great-great-grandmother.
Oh, yeah.
But there were no men in my family survived past 50, so I didn't have a grandfather. But.
Well, I never knew my grandfather, but my grandmother's brother I knew quite well, Uncle Ed, my great-uncle. He was, according to his story, when he was a young man, he was a foreman on Buffalo Bill's ranch. He had quite a life.
How old is your great-grandson?
My great-grandson is 22.
22?
And my youngest grandson is 23.
So if he's 22, are you in danger of having a great-great now?
Well, I keep telling him I'm too young to be a great-great-grandfather. But he does have a girlfriend, so who knows?
I think you're going to be a great-great-grandfather.
Yeah, probably.
So tell me a little bit more about the 3rd.
Well,
Armored
these
Division.
are things that we had when we were a drill instructor and stuff. And these are the medals that I gained during the time. This is the 3 bronze, they're not bronze stars, they're battle stars. Okay. Because I was in 3 major battles, one of them being the Battle of Bulge, the European African Theater, and the Central Theater. And of course, this is my rank here. And this spearhead was the name of the 5th Armored Division.
So what happened in Africa? You never mentioned
And
Africa.
I never was in Africa, see, but because the African-European theater was tied together, it's all one medal.
Ah, okay. So is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about the military?
No, after I got out of the service, but because I was working as a building inspector at the City of Portland, I also became an instructor because of my education, an instructor at Mount Hood Community College and taught there for 11 years.
How long were you in the military?
33 months.
33 months.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound very long.
No,
until you,
but it was a long
the fact
time
that
to
you
me.
were at the Battle of the Bulge
Yeah,
and
Battle
things
of
like that.
The worst battle that I was ever in was not actually fighting or combat. We were repairing roads. And the tanks had gotten so far ahead that the supply trains couldn't caught up because the streets weren't well prepared. And we had been sent up to fix the streets, the roads, and they were terrible. And there was dead bodies everywhere because there'd just been a great battle fought there. And this is the worst one we ever were in. And we were taking the bodies out and putting them aside and marking them everywhere. And the major came down and says, "You can't do that. You just dump your gravel on everybody and move on. We got to have those trains with those trucks up there with the gasoline to keep going." And we were really feeling bad about it because there were a lot of dead bodies still in that street, and we just covered them up.
What time of year was this? Was this winter or summer?
This was just maybe a month before the war ended.
Okay.
And that's be like April.
So the
In
roads
45.
would have been really muddy and stuff then.
Huh?
The roads would have been really muddy.
Oh, really muddy and yeah, but that wasn't the only thing. Don't forget they were shelled too. We had to fill the shell holes and everything. So the roads and the tanks could go almost anywhere, but the trucks could not. And they had supply trucks carried the gasoline and of course the food and stuff for them to be replaced. But that was the worst time of my whole deal. In fact, I started going here to the Gresham City Hall with meeting with the veterans, and I told them my story about, and I thought it was over the war, and that night I dreamed of that same battle, and I didn't go back for a year because of it. But you never get over it. And the one thing that really affected me from the war, besides my health, the pneumonia, when I came home, I didn't seem to want to join with any of my old friends. If I'd see a classmate, I'd walk across the street and avoid him. And I realized later that because of the fact that during the war, if I had a friend, I lost him. I was thinking along the line, if I made friends again, I would lose them.
Yeah. Now you said that you attend on Thursday nights, I believe it is, downtown?
Yes, at Gresham City Hall on the third Thursday of every month at 6 o'clock, 6 to 8, veterans meet and everybody's welcome. We also have a dinner. And we have they have a couple of chaplains that help there, and it's interesting. Everybody should come.
And you'd been there for a while. And
Oh,
then
I've
you
been
said
going
one
for
night,
the last couple of years now.
And then one night you said you had a problem where it reminded
That
you.
was when I first went, yeah.
Right.
And then I didn't go for a year. And finally, one of the fellows there talked me into coming back. So I've been going there ever since.
So.
And Fred does too, Fred Forsythe, my friend.
Well, is there anything else, Kenneth, that you'd
No,
like to
I
share
think
with
that's
us?
about it. You got my whole life.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you for being a veteran
thank you.
for us and for joining us on the show.
Well, thank you for presenting it.
And that's it for the Veterans History Project for today. Thank you for joining us.